So welcome, first of all. Thank you for joining the Startup Talk today, and I'm very happy to be here. As Frederica said, it would have been very nice to be there in person, but I think it's probably the safer and better option that we have right now. I hope that everyone is also adopted or has adopted well to the current situation here at Celonis. It's actually worked incredibly well. We've done a huge effort as a company to really shift everyone to working from home, and today is actually my first day here back at the office. It feels a little strange, but there are a couple of people here, and we're happy to be here and share some thoughts and a little bit of history about ourselves today. I would love to kick it off. Just give you a little bit of an overview of myself, my story with Celonis, before we go diving a little bit deeper into Celonis itself and how we've evolved as a company. So I actually started my career in finance. Started working when I was 21 in 2010, and worked as an investment banker in London for a couple of years. Before then, pursued an MBA and wanted to really do a career change. I was really excited by the prospect of working in a young entrepreneurial company. I wanted to work in tech, after finishing my MBA, I was really looking into the market and trying to figure out, okay, what kind of company can I join? And I knew I wanted to join kind of a very innovative company, and at the time, especially when you were looking in Europe and in Germany, I didn't really find as many, really innovative companies that were doing something truly unique and really innovating. And I noticed that there were a couple of companies which were kind of, in the internet space, or sometimes they were kind of, copying things that were done in other places around the world. But when I heard about Celonis, through a friend of mine who was working there, I first of all couldn't really understand, what is process mining. I didn't really know what it was, couldn't really put my finger on it. And then, when I then found out that, they had just raised a Series A of close to 30 million, I thought, okay, I better take a closer look at this, because this doesn't happen so often for companies, especially out of Munich, which is also my original hometown. And so I thought about, okay, what would be my criteria for a company where I would want to work next, and had 4 pieces of criteria. So first of all, I really wanted to believe in the idea, and the second one was I wanted to make sure that the company had was well funded, and it was somewhat validated by external investors, because sometimes we come across companies that we think are very exciting, that I think have a bright future. But having some external validation, by renowned investors, was certainly something that I was looking for, and in order to make my career, bet. And the third one was I really wanted to, be able to join a company where I could feel I could still have an impact and make an impact. And the last one was I really wanted to find a company where I could trust and believe in the leadership team, that they would be, able to carry the company forward, and also that they were in it for the long run, and not necessarily looking for an easy exit. And all of these 4 things were really present with Celonis, right? And especially for me as somebody who was non-technical and not coming from computer science background, but coming from finance with a business background, it was actually pretty easy for me to understand what Celonis was doing, because the product is very visual, and I could really relate to it. And this all really helped me once I started the company, because I could really have a business driven conversation rather than a technical conversation when I was talking to customers, and I could really use kind of what I had learned before in my previous experience. So I joined the company in 2016, which is now roughly 4 years ago, and it was just after the company had raised their Series A, and they were planning to expand into the stage, which is a huge move for any company coming out of Europe. Many companies actually fail at expanding to North America. It's a bigger market. You need more money. You need strong partners. It's really a big challenge, and And so yeah, there was this opportunity to basically be one of the first people to join in the US organization. So that really attracted me. So I was basically the first person on the ground in the US together with our co-founder Alexander Rinke, and went over there and really got off, on the ground, hit the ground running, and tried to really build the operations from the ground up. So we were in the very fortunate position that obviously we had already investors backing it. We had some money. We had a proven product that where we were able to get a pretty big existing customer base of renowned companies, Fortune 500 companies. So all of these things were really playing in our cards, and made it a lot easier than potentially starting from scratch. But it was still very much like starting almost like a new company in another continent. And so when I at the time when I joined the company, there were around 60 people working at Celonis. We were working out of our office close to where the Oktoberfest in Munich actually takes place, and we didn't really have any other offices outside of the one in Munich. So when I was in the US, it was also the first time for me working in the States. I'd lived there when I was a little bit younger for just a year, but it was really a new experience, and I had the chance to really travel to many different cities, visit many different customers. We were starting to basically build up a team there of people who would help us position Celonis to different customers and bring it to the various regions in the US, because as you probably know, right, the US is a huge country, and being able to really cover the different regions requires having people in different locations, or at least covering these different regions and then traveling to those customers in order to see them. And yes, we were able to pretty rapidly win some significant customers in the US. For example, like 3M, which is a big client nowadays as well. And it was a really good and successful initial period. So we were able to win significant revenue, hire up a team, and this was kind of the initial starting phase of how I joined the company. So my responsibility there was basically leading the initial team to build up our sales, right? And we at the time were very lucky, and still are, to be partnered with SAP, right? As you know, Hasso Plattner is one of the founders of SAP, and this was a huge help for us at the beginning, because we didn't have a brand in the US at the time, and having SAP as a close partner was extremely helpful, because they obviously helped us open a lot of doors to customers that they already had long-standing relationships with. And we were able to then come in and present our solution and really work side by side with SAP in order to position it. And when you're entering a new market, having a partner that you can lean on, that you can work together, can be a huge benefit, right? And so we were very lucky in that sense. So after kind of the first 1.5 years, we noticed that in order to really continue to scale, we couldn't be implementing all of the software that we had sold ourselves. So we really needed to have local implementation partners that could help us implement the Celonis with their customers and make them successful. So that was kind of the next challenge that I took on then, was trying to recruit and develop and train partners in the US that could help us, not only open doors with customers, but also really implement the solution and make the customer successful. So we looked at, or we started working with some smaller boutique consultancies, right, that were very agile, very nimble, fast to adopt an innovative solution, and hungry to be working with us. And we also work with some of the really large established companies, such as the Big Four that probably most of you also know, and are still growing these relationships today. But that was kind of the next challenge. And then after doing that for another year or so, I moved into a more global role, which is the one that I'm in now, as VP of Global Business Development. and where I initially basically started taking on, I would say, like more special projects. So for example, I was working on our expansion to Japan as well. Really scouting out the market, meeting the first customers, trying to get a sense for the market. Does it make sense for Celonis to be there and have a presence? And it turned out it made a lot of sense for us to be there. And we then went ahead and hired a president over there, and now we have a team of, I would say, 10 or 15 people. That's fast growing as well. So this has been great. And since about 6 months, I actually joined the product organization, reporting to our chief product officer Hala Zain, who also came over from SAP, of having a phenomenal career there for 20 years, and we're very happy to have her. Now leading our technology partners, meaning working with partners like SAP or Microsoft or smaller companies that can really extend our functionality, and integrating with them. So this has kind of been my journey so far with Celonis, and I'm really excited what's to come. But enough said about myself, and I'm happy to answer more questions as we go along, and there will be the opportunity, or there is the opportunity, to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer all of them. But let's dive a little bit deeper into Celonis and how Celonis has evolved as a company. So this is Celonis today, right? So we have more than 100 million in ARR, which is a phenomenal milestone. Only very, very few companies are actually able to achieve this, and this has been a big success for us as a company. And it took us nearly 10 years, so 9 years to get there. And now we're really excited about the next phase. But if you look at us, across like different dimensions, we now have. We're working with some of the leading customers in the industry. So whether it's oil and gas, or aerospace and defense, or CPG, you can see some of the names on the screen. But we're really happy that we can work with so many customers, and help them have more streamlined and processes. Also, the analyst community is very important, and this is something that we made a lot of investments in the past as well. Is really building a category, right? Because process mining was not known before, and you had to build a category. We had to educate the market, and analysts can be a huge benefit in doing that, or a huge support in doing that rather. So we're now working with the leading analyst companies in the world that all have analysts that are actively covering process mining, that have named us actually a leader, or the leader in process mining globally. And also the press has picked up on us, right? So you may have already seen some articles, but it's not only German press, but really internationally. You can see the Wall Street Journal, Reuters, the Financial Times. These are all important outlets to help us really build a brand, build this category, and you're very pleased to it starting being recognized more and more. And as you can see, even Harvard Business Review says you should be exploring process mining. So how did it all get started? It was basically 3 friends with one vision. So here we have our 3 founders, starting from the left with Bastian, Alex, and Martin. And they actually all met at the Technical University in Munich as part of a consulting project that they were doing. And the customer was like a Bavarian broadcasting company, and they were tasked with the problem of effectively trying to improve the process of the IT service management in that company, right? So when you ever have a problem with your computer, your laptop, your phone, you're probably going to submit a ticket, and that will end up in a service center where they try to resolve this as fast as possible in order to get you up and running and make you productive again. And what can sometimes happen there in these processes, right? That there's these loops of different tickets being pinged around amongst different experts in the company, trying to find the right one, trying to resolve it. for example, right? So there's all these little inefficiencies that can creep in, and typically in the past people would kind of try to interview people and try to understand, okay, why are these inefficiencies happening? What kind of inefficiencies are happening? Where are they happening? And really try to kind of triangulate the problem by talking to different people. And so since they had come, were still effectively students and very, very close to academics, they discovered this concept which had existed in academia called process mining. And so they thought, why not you apply process mining? This seems like a perfect fit. And they also saw that the customer actually had a system where they were capturing all of this information that they actually needed, right? And so they, went away and they developed a prototype and they were basically connecting to the customer system and extracting the data that they had on all their tickets. And then they went away and analyzed it, printed it out in big sheets, put it on the wall of the customer, and effectively showed them, visualized their process, right? And so the customer was so blown away by that, they'd never seen anything like that before, as they were just used to kind of the previous kind of traditional consulting approach. And then they realized, hey, this could be something potentially very big. So they took the courage and started Celonis effectively on the back of this particular project. So talking a little bit about process mining technology, right? As I said, it comes from academia, and we today as Celonis actually still have a very close tie with the academic community, and we're supporting a lot of research and working very closely with a lot of universities. But how you have to imagine is effectively whenever somebody works in an organization, they're typically part of a process, right? So you either work, for example, in order management or in procurement, or you're working in sales, right, or accounting. And as part of your daily activities, right, you're typically working as part of a larger process, right? That's kind of the lifeblood of an organization, and they need these processes in order to function and run well. And so you're typically working, for example, on an ERP system or a CRM system, right? And as you're executing on your work, right, these systems are effectively capturing, what you're doing. Because you're effectively creating a new invoice, you're changing things about an invoice, you're sending an invoice, right? These are all things that you're doing. And so the system is actually capturing this, and it's capturing in a very specific way. So there's typically an ID, right? A certain identifier. So for example, an invoice number, right? And then there is an activity. So, did you create did you create this invoice? Did you change it, right? Did you change the address of the invoice? What did you do, right? An activity. And the third thing is there's typically a timestamp. So when did you actually do this? And with these three pieces of information, you're actually able to string together the process, right? And so that's, I think, at the heart of what process mining is doing, is basically being able to mine all of this data and then to recreate, automatically recreate and visualize the actual process of what actually happened in the organization. Especially as these processes are repeated, thousands or hundreds of thousands of times by different people. So a little bit about our history. So as I said, right, we are now 9 years old. So Celonis was founded actually in 2011. And that's also when the first customer co-innovation, started taking place. So, the first one was the Bayerische Rundfunk, right, the Bavarian Broadcasting Company. But then, very soon after that, there were other companies, huge ones such as Siemens and Bayer, who also found out about, this technology and what, the story of what, Celonis was able to do at the broadcasting company. So they thought, okay, maybe we can actually take this and apply this in a much bigger way to different processes. So not only to IT service management, but also to their procurement and their order management and so forth, right? And so that's really how this got started. And I think this was kind of a huge challenge at the time. Working as a very small company, working with such big customers, right? Because they're obviously extremely demanding. And they have working with massive data volumes, and oftentimes what you'll see is that software companies, they will start off by working with the SMBs and smaller companies, right? To really prove their software and then go into the enterprise market, right? But here, what happens is actually the other way around, right? The first customers right away with these huge organizations. So again, this was very challenging, but at the same time, it was also a blessing, because that meant that they were forced to really build a software and develop a software that worked with large data volumes, that was fit for the enterprise, and was able to really work in that environment. And then in 2015, we signed a global reseller agreement with SAP. So SAP can actually resell our software into all its existing customer base, which was a huge milestone. It's typically very hard to do that, because there's very stringent requirements of working with SAP in terms of the quality of your product and the professionalism of the company. And so it doesn't happen very often for smaller companies to have that kind of that relationship that early on. Then in 2016, we received the funding to expand into North America, as I mentioned earlier, right? Which was really the first time the company took on external funding. So before that, they were entirely bootstrapped, which again meant that they had to be extremely focused on the customers and really winning deals, because they were kind of financing the company as they were going along. In 2017, the global expansion continued with opening offices in the UK and the Netherlands. In June 2018, when we had our Series B, when we actually officially became a unicorn, reaching a $1 billion valuation. And in 2018, later in that year, this was actually a huge milestone for the company. We launched the Intelligent Business Cloud, right? So before that, we were predominantly selling software, perpetual software. Many customers were still wanting to deploy on-premise because it was very sensitive data that we were analyzing. And we actually made a step to kind of rebuild the software and make it a full SaaS solution in the cloud. And that's actually our primary way of selling today, right? So we are a full cloud company end to end, and this transition was extremely smooth. So that was a huge task. And then in 2019, we actually hosted the first global process mining conference, which we named Celosphere, right? So this was the first time we actually held a global event where we had customers from and partners from all over the world, so from the US, from Latin America, from Japan, all coming to Munich together to basically listen to stories from other customers, to exchange, to get trained, to listen to our executives, and to learn new things about the product. And we had 1,000 customers and partners actually attending, which was a huge success at the time. And I'll get to it in a second, because we were actually able to exceed that by many times when we did our event this year. And so, shortly after that event, we actually launched the Superfluid Enterprise version and a new corporate identity. So what you're seeing today is, already that new corporate identity. Then later in 2019, which was a hugely exciting couple of months, I still remember it. Not only did we announce our Series C funding at a $2.5 billion valuation, but we also won the German President's Award, which was a great achievement, and the first time that a software company won that in Germany. And yeah, so that's, I think, a little bit the story till today. As I promised, we actually held the Celosphere event live in a virtual format this year, and we had 15,000 people who registered, around 10,000 people who attended. So this would have never been possible, probably had we held it in person. And this was a great success for all of us, and actually proved to how Celonis was able to really make a shift from working in offices and having in-person events to having a virtual presence.
Thank you, Marc, for the overview of the Celonis history. We got one question. You just mentioned that in 2015, SAP and Celonis agreed on the global reseller agreement, and So someone asked, why did SAP partner with Celonis? Isn't Celonis kind of a competitor of SAP with its product proposal? So you might answer the question now.
Great question. So the program that we joined is actually called the Solution Extension Partner Program. So it's a select number of partners of SAP that basically complement, right? So not compete with SAP, but actually complement the solution portfolio at SAP. So that these could be like innovative companies in areas where SAP doesn't have its own solution. And obviously since process mining was so new, SAP recognized that this is something very valuable for its customers, right? Especially since they had a very long standing and loyal customer base, and they could see that introducing them Celonis and partnering with Celonis could help them actually become even better, right, on SAP, meaning improve their processes and also help actually transition to S/4HANA, which is kind of one of the biggest kind of new product introductions of SAP and initiatives, is actually migrating a lot of their existing customers to S/4HANA, and SAP and Celonis can actually really help with that and support customers, because it allows them to have like full transparency before, during, and after the migration into their processes, to actually understand how they have to improve, how they have to streamline, and then to kind of safeguard that investment afterwards. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Marc.
Great. How are we doing in time? Because I have no...
I think we're fine.
Okay, perfect. So I want to talk over this only very briefly, but I think it's probably interesting for all of you as well. But I think one thing to understand, right, is that companies are spending billions of dollars in trying to digitize their process, right? And this is not something new. This has happened already effectively since the 70s, right, where they had the mainframe, then they had the PC. In the 90s they had the ERP. In the 2000s the line of business apps, and then since 2010, really the introduction of cloud applications, right? So there's always kind of been a lot of investment in trying to digitize companies and improve, at the end of the day, processes, right? If you look at the landscape today, right? There's an average company has more than 500 enterprise applications. There's $431 billion being spent on enterprise software globally, and 2 out of 3 CEOs say that digital strategy is a top priority, right? And so I think this is becoming increasingly important, but this has already been happening for a long time. So what's interesting is that the processes that companies are running still don't really deliver the expected results. So if you look at, for example, digital transformation projects, they're often over budget and behind schedule. And so if you look at kind of like the outcomes, right, that are happening today, right, for example, in the front office, there's still a 16% customer cancellation rate. The net promoter score is pretty low, or in the back office, right, the on-time construction is only 67%, right. So these are all, at the end of the day, right, outcomes, business outcomes, and behind these business outcomes and behind these experiences are typically processes that drive these experiences, right? And so there's still a huge improvement potential, and customers or companies are recognizing that they have to get better, and they're trying to find ways to effectively get better. And so the actual dilemma, right, is that these business processes, right, are often running across rigid and fragmented technology landscapes. So there will be different systems for different parts of the processes in different departments. Companies over time acquire other companies or merge with other companies. So you end up with an extremely complex system landscape, and so there is a gap really between a company's aspiration, right, of what they want to do, and reality in business processes, right? And so I think we're trying to really address this gap and help companies to really streamline, optimize, improve, innovate processes across their existing landscape. And so here's an example, right? I mean, for example, if you look at a purchase order or in order management or a lead that is being generated, right? They might be flowing to different systems, SAP, Workday, Oracle. There might be some parts that are in Excel and Outlook and so forth, which at the end, for example, result in the fact that you ship the order too late, right? And the customer doesn't receive their order on time, or you actually make the payment too late to your suppliers, which at the end of the day are bad business outcomes that you don't want to happen. And so these symptoms can be felt all across the enterprise, right? So you often can't really see how these processes are really running, right? So you only ever, if you're a manager, you only ever, kind of see what's immediately in front of you, but you never kind of get the full view. And there's a lot of friction, but you don't really know what the root causes are, right? So you're only getting presented with kind of the outcomes and the results. And sometimes you don't have the right tools to fix the friction, right? And I think a lot of this has really been, made worse, or these problems have been surfaced even more in recent times through COVID, right? So there's been a lot of additional economic challenges. There've been, increase in delivery times. Many people have lost their jobs. There's a decrease in corporate cash reserves, and many people are working from home. So that means, supply chains need to be rethought, processes need to be rethought. You need to think about how can you, preserve cash, right? So making sure you really time, the way that you pay your suppliers in the right way, and the way that you collect cash from your customers to really manage your cash effectively, and to really adapt to this new situation, right? And in order to do that, you need to be agile. You need to really understand your business very well. And I think this is where we can help customers even more, and many of our existing customers are really leaning on us and doubling down on their investment with us to basically help them. So this friction, right, is also not something that's just kind of felt at the top of the pyramid, right, for executives who don't hit their targets, but it's often it's often also the daily work that we are experiencing, right, the frustration if for example we are not when things aren't working the way they should be, if we're waiting for things from other departments, right? And so it's also impacting our daily lives as we're working as employees. So having kind of better processes also means not only better experiences for customers, but also us being able to really perform our best and having a better experience as an employee. So the idea basically is that there's a new way, right, the Celonis way, to eliminate this friction and improve execution across the organization, right, and across the IT landscape. And the way we do that, right, is really being able to connect to all of the different various systems, understanding what is going on, and then basically being like an intelligent layer above those existing systems, right? So not trying to replace it, not trying to replace SAP. Keep SAP, keep all the other systems, but connect Celonis to understand, your process, what's going on, and then basically optimize them in real time to remove the friction that is in your process, right? And so how does that work, right? So as I said, right, you first of all need to know your processes. You need to understand how your processes are really running, right? And in order to do that, we've basically built connectors to over 80 different systems to be able to connect to them and exchange with them in real time. And we have a patented process visualization to basically help us understand and visualize this process and these processes, right? The second thing is you need to be able to sense friction points at their root causes in real time, right? So it's not necessarily always looking like after the fact, okay, what are we doing wrong? What has gone wrong over the last 6 months? Or, what did we do well? But as these processes are unfolding, to understand, okay, where is friction occurring? And then being able to remedy that friction, right? And so there we're working with, machine learning root cause analysis to, automatically identify root causes of potential friction points. And we've also codified more than 400 skills into our product, which basically creates business context, right? So we actually know, what are the potential anomalies in an accounting process, right? Or in your sales process, what are things that you should be looking out for? And then we can sense that friction, basically notify or signal to the people working in the process, and then, finally, make them act, right? And so this can basically mean that, this is a completely, automated ramification that's happening in the background. So we are identifying a friction, and we can remedy it and basically, make remove that friction and let the process continue to flow. Or it means that we actually need to basically signal the user, right, that's responsible for a particular invoice, for example, or for the particular process, and recommend a next best action that they should take, right? And so what's really cool is that because we've also built connections back into the system, right? So basically update changes in the system and update records. It means that, for example, you don't necessarily have to go back into the system to make the change, but you can basically let Celonis make that change automatically in the system and then remove that friction. Do we have more questions that we should go into?
I got one with SAP, but I think we'll keep that until the end.
Okay. All right, and then I thought it would be helpful or interesting for everyone to just get a little bit of an understanding of kind of our architecture as a platform, right? So I talked a little bit about the fact that we have this real-time connectivity into these different data sources, and that's actually extremely important, right? As you figured out earlier, right? Enterprises on average have 500 different applications, right? So we are still investing heavily in trying to grow the number of connectors we have and trying to make these extremely stable. So we are able to really, get connected to as many systems as possible, or to the most critical systems within the customer, and to get that data, right? And for that, we have our event collection and our task mining. So event collection is, connecting to SAP, to Oracle, to these various source systems, and then task mining is actually the ability to connect to people's desktops and to understand, okay, what are they doing on the desktop, right? So for example, what are they doing in Excel? What is it they're doing on the screen, right? So all these actions that that the users are still doing that aren't necessarily leaving a footprint in form of a log in the underlying system, we're still able to capture that. Then we have our process AI engine, and that consists of a few things, right? So, one thing is the action engine, right, which I just talked about. So basically being able to kind of alert the user to taking a certain action, right? And these are, can depend on many different skills that we have. Then there's machine learning. So we have actually natively built in machine learning workbench, right? That allows you to really easily write Python script directly on the data that we have. And we have the process automation, right? So ability to really automate processes in the background based on the intelligence insights that we have. And then our business context library, where we basically, collecting knowledge over processes over time. So what are the key KPIs that matter for this process? And, what are the key KPIs that matter in a procurement process, for example, right? And then we have the kind of the boards or the UI, UX layer, where we have the ability to design these really nice dashboards where you have your process analytics and your transformation center. And then on top of that, you can either have kind of analytical apps, which are more for the analytical user and trying to understand kind of the process over time and make changes and improvements, right? And then we have something which we announced very recently, which are the operational apps. So basically really, packaging everything we have, right, from data connectors to, business contacts in our process AI engine to dedicated dashboards around a particular domain area. So for example, we released 2 applications, one for accounts payable and one for supply chain material movement. But the exciting thing is not only are we building more of these apps ourselves, but we are also looking for our partners and our ecosystem, our community, potentially even you, to build these apps in future, because you may already have knowledge about a particular process, or you're really excited about our platform and the capabilities you have, but you want to build a business on it. And so you can really take that knowledge that you have or gather it and then basically bring it into the platform, because at the end of the day, we're a software company. We can't possibly know how every single process in the world should work. We don't have that necessarily that business knowledge that is required and the business context to kind of help optimize those processes. So we're really looking for our kind of partner community, ecosystem, to help us do that together, so we can build amazing products together.
Thank you, Marc, for the nice introduction of our Celonis platform and architecture. I might read out another question.
Sure.
I think this was already very convincing about our software, but one question arose that was, how do you convince your first customers that already invested a lot of money in SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, not to further invest in the latest feature of those players, but go with a little new player like Celonis?
I think, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that SAP and Oracle and a lot of these systems are also getting a lot better, right? But at the end of the day, they are like the transactional systems, right? And I think that we provide really something that's unique and complementary, right? So we are working together with SAP, right? We are their biggest cloud partner, solution extension partner globally now. So it's really like a unified effort, right? And we're often talking to them around product innovations and things that are required. So it's really I would say a joint effort, right? And I don't think necessarily that the customers have to make a decision on like, do I either buy this or do I buy Celonis or do I buy this new feature from SAP? But it's really how can the two kind of work together, right? How can Celonis and the latest features work together to make 1 + 1 = 3 effectively, right? So great example is what I mentioned earlier, is for example the transition to S/4HANA, right? You can that is the latest and greatest from SAP, but in order to make that transition as smooth and as effective as possible, right? Because these are huge projects, right? So you can make that additional investment and make sure in Celonis and then make sure that the transition is really successful, right? So that's like one example. Another example is when we first started working with SAP, we were actually being positioned or sold directly on the HANA database, right? So this was a new product innovation from SAP, right? The HANA in-memory database, and Celonis was kind of one of the really innovative applications that was running on the HANA database. So again, a great example is like you want to have the latest and greatest from SAP, right, which was the HANA in-memory database, but then you also need a very innovative application that can actually leverage the power of a HANA database, and that was Celonis. So yeah, I don't think there's necessarily a competition, but actually you can be greater together.
Thank you, Marc. We got another questions about the task mining options that you have with Celonis.
Yeah.
How do companies benefit from these very detailed information gathered from task mining? I think this is a very good questions and brings out the added value Celonis has for companies.
Sure, no, that's a great question as well. I mean, I think that when you're capturing the data from the actual source systems, there's still sort of like a dark spot or a blind spot, so to say, right? So there's certain things that kind of like happening in between process steps where people might be spending some time in a different application or spending time in Excel or reading a document on screen, right? And task mining is really there to basically complement that and to create basically visibility into those dark spots or blind spots, so to say. And a great example of that is for example one of our customers. They have a process where they actually need to basically approve, need to approve and check, for example, IDs and licenses, right, of employees or potential employees, and in order to do that, right, there's basically agents that are kind of opening up, potentially scans and PDFs files and so forth, and are able to check and read, the documentation, the licensing, the ID, and so forth. And then they basically need to make sure that all checks up, that it's all consistent, and that they can basically approve that for further processing. And that's something, right, that's the reading, the opening of the PDF, the reading on the screen, that's something that's not necessarily captured in any given in any source system, right? And so that's something that we can then also monitor and see, okay, how much time did the agent actually spend, for example, on checking that PDF, right? Did they only spend like half a second or a second and just click through, right? Probably they then didn't really do their job properly, and they should have checked it longer, right? So those are, for example, cases that they can be flagged and said, okay, we need to kind of check that again and make sure that we're really being compliant and checking all the IDs and the applications properly.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I read it out. On the data, but also on the process AI engine level. What
Yeah.
are the key ingredients to do the abstraction from concrete steps, activities to a higher, more readable, informative level?
Can you read that question again? That was a...
On the data,
Yeah.
but also on the process AI engine level.
Yeah.
What are the key ingredients to do the abstraction from concrete steps and activities to a higher, more informative level?
Yeah. So I don't know whether I can answer this like to the level of detail that you want me to, but I think at a high level, what I was saying earlier, right, is basically if you're looking at the data, the logs that you're getting out of the source system, right, you have these three different pieces of information, right? The ID, the activity, and the timestamp, right? And I think the challenging piece is really doing taking these three pieces of information, right, and being able to basically take that data out of the underlying tables, for example, of SAP, Oracle, and so forth, and then basically creating the process from that, right? And I think that if you only have very few pieces of information, it's not as hard. But if you have millions of data records, that's actually where kind of like the Celonis magic, right, comes in, and that's also kind of our proprietary technology, patent technology, is kind of how we are able to then string together that process and also for example, name the different activities that are actually happening in the process. But yeah, you can also contact me. I'll share my email later. I'm happy to follow up and dive deeper on that question as well. But I think that's also part of our magic.
Thank you, Marc. I think now you can continue.
Sure. So I think why should you be excited about Celonis? I think that and many of you may still have the biggest part of your career in front of you, or just starting to look around. And I think that I think Celonis is a really exciting place. I think that the growth that we have every year is just unbelievable, right? So we're effectively doubling the company. Every year I've been with the company, we've been able to double the company, even through challenging times that we're facing at the moment. And I think with that growth, there's always great opportunity, right, to take on new challenges, to take on more responsibility. And so I think that's something to be absolutely excited about. We now have more than 1,000 employees around the globe, right? And I think, as I said, 4 years ago, I joined the company and we had 60 employees, right? So that's tremendous growth in that time. And sometimes it's it can feel a little strange or scary because I go to New York and then I come back to the Munich office, or you go on vacation for a couple of weeks and you come back to the office and have all these new faces, and you don't know who's new and who's already been there for a month or longer, right? But no, this is exciting. This is great, and I think we're becoming an increasingly global company, right? So we started off in Munich, we expanded into North America, where we also now have offices not only in New York, which is kind of our dual headquarter together with Munich, but we also have a hub right in Raleigh. We have an office in San Francisco. We have an office in Miami, where we're covering most of Latin America. And we opened London. As I said, we opened Tokyo. We opened Japan. We have a development hub in Pristina. And we are also now, opening a new office in Amsterdam. We had an office in the Netherlands before, but we're opening a new one in Amsterdam. We are opening up a Madrid hub, right, where we're going to have a lot of central functions covering Europe mostly. And we're also opening up an office in Paris. So, there will probably be more new offices that will be opening. But, I think that, is amazing, because that means the company is becoming more international. I think that also means that if you're working for Celonis, there's an opportunity to move around, right? To work in different locations, to work with colleagues from different locations, to cover different regions. And I think it's great to see that. So very briefly on this, I think that we have a really unique opportunity as a company. And as I said, right, we spent the last 10 years trying to grow the company to 100 million, which only very, very few companies actually are able to achieve that. To grow to 100 million, that's kind of like the make or break. But we don't want to stop here. Our plan is to grow the company to $1 billion in revenue over the next 4 or 5 years. And we also don't want to stop there, right? We think that we can be a $10 billion company in terms of revenue. Obviously, that's still a couple of years out, but there is a vision, right? We don't want to stop. We think that we have a unique opportunity to become a generational company like Google, or Facebook, like Amazon, like Microsoft. And yeah, I think we are just getting started. This is a rocket ship, and I think if you can get a seat, you should try to get a seat. So very quickly, I think that we, as I already said, this goes also in line with Earth is our future and the best team wins in terms of our values, right? We really want to be a diverse company, right? So this is also aspirational. We want to be have a diverse team. Right, but making sure that everybody is committed, has character and capabilities, and those are kind of the 3 C's that we hire for, and making sure that we have people on board that kind of fulfill meet these criteria, and that we creating a global and diverse company. So finally, I think these are some nice kind of little snippets here. As you can see, a little team dinner. I guess this was kind of pre COVID-19 times, and hopefully we'll go back to that very soon. But having company gatherings, team events is very important to us as well. We're currently doing these virtually, but I'm sure we'll go back to them, having them in person very soon. And just to leave you with a couple of remarks here as well. I think that this was a quote from Steve Jobs that we also can really support or believe in. He who said that it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do, right? But we want to hire smart people so they can tell us what to do, right? And I think that also really goes hand in hand with our kind of value of ownership and our ownership culture, right? So we want to make sure that we have very capable people. And who are willing to learn, but who are very smart, right? But then who can basically take ownership and lead and do those tasks, and tell us what to do and how to improve, right? Because at the end of the day, the best team wins. So yeah, I think this was everything from my end that I wanted to share. I don't know how we're doing in time or whether there are more questions. I'm happy to take additional time to answer them.
Thank you, Marc. This was very insightful. Your story with Celonis. You've been on the journey for a long time now.
Yeah.
There are quite some questions from the chat. I might start with the more general questions about our vision.
Yep.
What is your vision and roadmap for the next decade? In which direction is process mining going? And what is still missing in the field?
Yeah. So I think from a product perspective, I think some of what I touched on is really where we're going. So I think that process mining is kind of the underlying technology that drives us, right? But we've come a long way from kind of like the process mining, in its original sense, where it's really primarily a diagnostic to visualize the company's process and to analyze it, right? But we're really, going into the direction of, as I said, operational apps. So really having applications which can connect to the various different systems within a company, that basically come pre-packaged with a lot of kind of domain knowledge around that particular area, to really help optimize processes end to end for different user levels in the organization, right? So all the way from, for example, an accounting clerk who the head of accounting, and for example, the CFO, because I think what happens a lot of times is that you as an executive want to shift gears, want to put focus on a certain KPI or drive a certain priority. And then there's kind of like a break or a gap between what you want as an executive or what the company wants, and then how that is actually translated in the day-to-day operations. And we can really establish that link and really become kind of like an intelligent execution application effectively to help support the decisions, but also automate the decisions that people are doing on a day-to-day basis, right? And I think that we are only at the beginning there, and going into different segments in different domain areas is definitely going to be a key focus for us. And alongside of that, we really want to make sure that we have everything that we need to deliver those applications, right? So meaning really having excellent connectivity in all the different systems, right? Having automations into or connections into as many different systems to basically automate certain aspects of the process, right? And then becoming smarter in kind of like recognizing anomalies, being more predictive in certain ways. So I think those are all this was at a high level kind of the direction we're going. And I think that if you look at our existing customer base, right, we have around 800 customers, and there's obviously a huge opportunity in that itself, is that you can not only learn from your own processes and how to improve them, but you can actually learn from other customers and how they're doing things, right? So being able to then improve processes based on insights of all our customers is certainly something that we're also working on and investing in to basically really ingrain more and more of this kind of business knowledge into our solution, into our platform.
Thank you. This was a nice look into the future, and now we're going back to 2015 when Celonis and SAP agreed on a reseller agreement. The question was, did this agreement with SAP impacted the product roadmap, and how did that impact your sales?
So, I think that that if you go into such a strategic partnership as we did with SAP, it certainly does always impact your product roadmap, right? Because you want to make sure that you have, you then have capabilities that really make sure that you can, work with, SAP and SAP's, different business units, right, extremely well, right? So for example, it's not only SAP ERP, but they also bought Ariba and SuccessFactors, and most recently also Qualtrics, right? And I think that Ryan Smith is also an investor in our company since the last round. So we want to look at ways that we can now, for example, also work with the Ariba team, potentially also with the Qualtrics team. So, and having the right product capabilities to support that are really important, right? So I think that's definitely something that comes into account and factors into your product roadmap. How does that affect your sales? I mean, I think that working with a strategic partner, right, like we did with SAP, obviously means that you have to have a certain focus and set the right incentives for your people in the field to also work with that partner, right? Because you want to make sure that people are, collaborating, that there is trust, right, in the relationship, because without trust there isn't, partnership, and so you have to take that into account. I don't know whether there is necessarily an impact because you're changing your product roadmap because of the partner, on your sales. I would say it's one direction, right? If you're developing new products, because you're putting a strategic focus on a particular ecosystem, on a particular partner, and you're improving your product in a certain direction, obviously you also want to then support your sales effort and your go-to-market efforts, and steer them in the right direction or in the same direction. So you're really working as one team and you're all pulling on the same string.
No, thank you. We got another technical question regarding task mining. Is robotic process automation on your roadmap?
So we don't have robotic process automation, and it's not on our roadmap as of today. I mean, we have our own process automation, right? So meaning that we have the ability to basically automate in the back-end system, right? And directly talk to APIs or to BAPIs, for example, in SAP. As you know, robotic process automation is really all about executing automations or clicks in the front end, so basically mimicking what the user would be doing in the user interface. And we have integrations to basically the major RPA players in the space, meaning that if you want to, for example, need to automate a certain step through the user interface level as part of one of our process automation workflows, you could very well do that and basically trigger a bot that then works and executes that process, right? And then those bots would, for example, come from any RPA player really that we then integrate with.
Thank you, Marc. Any more questions? I think we answered all the questions that arose on the chat. We still have a few minutes to go, and we're happy to answer some more questions. Otherwise, here you can see a slide where you can just sign up and stay in touch with us or connect with us through one of our different social media channels. Also, you can connect with Marc. I think he has his contact details on the next slide. So this is him. And if there are not any more questions at the moment, reach out to us if there are questions later on, either personally or through talent@celonis.com. And then from my side, thank you very much for your attention, for your interest in Celonis, and we hope to see you soon sometime and stay in touch with you.
Thank you, everyone. Great talking to you virtually.